In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to shade a rounded object using the hatching method. So make sure you got a pencil and your marker. Make sure you've got your shading worksheet. And before we begin, I want to review how to use the hatching method in shade. So if you recall from the previous lesson, hatching is shading using lines that do not cross or intersect. So depending on how far apart your lines are spaced or how close together they are, that will determine how light or dark your values are. So if you use more lines and make them closer together, you'll end up with darker values. If you use less lines and space them out, you'll end up with lighter values. So as we take a look at our image and we look a little bit closer up, the other thing that I want to kind of draw your attention to is the direction of our lines. So anytime we shade an object that is rounded, we want to use something called cross contour lines. Cross contour lines are lines that look like they run across the form of the image. So for example, on our bird kind of has this round belly. So in order to shade that and make my bird look more realistic and the object look round, you want to make sure that you use lines that curve slightly along with the form. Okay, so you can, on this example, you can see how the lines are all curved. They all kind of curve in various degrees around the form this way. On our twig, which is also kind of a cylinder shape, the lines run kind of opposite of the way they do in the belly of the bird. So the lines tend to kind of curve around this way, almost kind of like a flattened U shape to make the way that looks. So we are going to use kind of similarly curved lines when we shade our apple. So the first thing I want to have you do is using your pencil. One thing I like to do is draw in the shape of my highlights, which are the lightest lights. So as you take a look over here, we've got a highlight on the apple where the light is reflecting on it. So I'm going to pencil that in, and then I'm also going to pencil in this lighter gray. Got two more highlights kind of up here. So just very lightly with your pencil, draw in the shape of your highlights. And I'm going to go ahead. What we're looking for when you're looking for highlights or when you're looking for darker shapes to pencil in, look for areas where you have a pretty high degree of contrast. So you see I've got kind of this really light shape compared to the much darker areas around it. Next, I'm also going to pencil in my darker shapes. So notice how this looks like a really dark value compared to this shape around it, and same down here. Okay, so by mapping this in, this just lets me kind of more accurately capture where I put my light and dark values. Also want to pencil in the shape of this cast shadow. So if the apple's sitting on the surface of this table, it's going to slightly cast a shadow. So underneath my apple that's already been drawn over here, I'm going to add the shape of my cast shadow. Okay, so once you have kind of penciled everything in, now we get our marker and add your shading. So take a look at your apple. You can kind of see the direction that the lines on the skin of the apple run. That'll give you an idea of how you want to shade that. And when I shade, I like to start with my lightest lines and work my way towards the darkest. Because it's a little bit easier, I think, to fill in the space between those lines. You can't really take away lines once you draw them in a marker. So I'm just going to start off, and I'm just going to do some lines that are pretty spaced apart. And I'm going to constantly look at the apple and then look back at my image as I draw to try to get those accurate. Now, if I want my highlights to look really light, I'm going to leave a space where those are so that they will appear like the lightest parts on my object. So notice how even this is a highlight and I want it to be a light value. I want this value over here to look much lighter than this. So I am going to go ahead and pencil that in. So next I'm going to go through and I'm going to add some medium values. So I'm going to take a look where kind of my lighter areas are and fill in some lines in between those. And then the last thing that I'll do is kind of pick out where are some of my darkest values and add more lines there. So in general, I tend to think light, medium, and dark. Where are my darks in the darkest areas? Where are my lights in the lightest areas? Add those in first, and then slightly adjust everything around from there. Now, when I take a look at this and I feel like I'm pretty well done, compare kind of how my shading looks here. Did I accurately capture kind of my darker areas with my shading? Kind of along here, did I leave my lightest parts, and do I kind of have a good kind of medium and good kind of transition from values? So if I make some lines longer, that'll make this look a little bit more gradual. So the last two things I'm going to do is I'm going to gradually add in just some lines that curve around for my cast shadow. So I'm going to spread those out quite a bit, and then as I get closer to the apple, I'll add a few more lines in there. And what that will do is that will kind of make it look under here on this part closest, that will appear darker. And then as this kind of fans out a little bit, it'll look a little bit lighter. To add in the background, because this is just one flat dark area, I'm just going to take my marker, still using hatching, so still using lines that only run one way. I'm just going to fill this in somewhat evenly. If you've got a few kind of tiny little gaps, that's not a big deal. I'm just going to kind of go back and forth. Now, one thing that's really important anytime you draw and do some shading is step back. Take a look at your image from a distance. See how it looks. If you're satisfied with everything, you like how it's come together, to finish this off and clean it up where you can still see your pencil lines, take your eraser and erase those. And now you should have your apple shaded using nothing but the hatching method to create your light, medium, and dark values.